Hi, this is Dr. Eric Westman with another edition of Ask Adapt for Adapt Your Life. Today's topic is how do you count carbs? And what about hidden carbs? What about net carbs? All this kind of confusion. Let me take you back just a little bit in a little historical view. Before 10 years ago, we never really talked about net carbs or subtracting carbs or worrying about anything other than total grams of carbs. So the historical use of a low-carb ketogenic diet or a keto diet through the last century of doctors using a keto diet really didn't subtract anything. They really just counted the total grams of carbohydrates. So if you want the strictest method, or if your metabolism is really tough, if you want to get into ketosis as much as possible, then I would use the total gram method of counting carbs, not net grams. If you came to my clinic and wanted to get this to work right the first time, then you would use the total gram method. And I start people out at about 20 grams of total grams of carbohydrate per day to ensure maximal fat burning. So the first question, Linda says, I've heard that erythritol or sugar alcohols get diverted into the blood and get excreted by the kidneys. I've also heard that it has a glycemic index of 0 and that none of the grams of erythritol get absorbed as calories. And this appears to be different than the other sugar alcohols. What's your take on it? Well, any of these other sweeteners than sugar are kind of a compromise we use to get people off of sugar at first. And so a lot of the people using artificial sweeteners or non-sugar sweeteners can use them, but some people can't. And so this is where the individual variability comes in. And the science is really not there to tell us in all of the situations that we see clinically what's going to happen, to predict what will happen. So in my experience, what I do is the old try it and see. There may be a study that says the sugar alcohol doesn't affect the blood sugar or it affects the insulin, but the clinical reality is that it's more complicated than that. So if you hear someone blanketly saying it doesn't matter, subtract the sugar alcohols or the artificial sweetener or the fiber, it's really not that simple. And I'll see this in products that are being sold under the net carb, and the marketers will just say blanketly it doesn't matter, just use net carbs. Well, it's more complicated than that. You may have to not use those products for a while until you're at your goal, or if your metabolism can tolerate it, great. Sima says, I used to eat avocado every day, but the carbs are so high, I used to go over the 20 grams. Can I deduct the fiber? Well, there again, in my experience, instead of thinking about the whole avocado, we allow people at first to have half an avocado. So the way you make a 10-gram item into a 5-gram item is to eat half of it, which is a recurring theme. There's really no forbidden food on a low-carb diet. It's just that if there are carbohydrates in the food, you can't have much of it. Tom asked the same thing about strawberries. How many can I have? I had 6 and I slipped out of ketosis. I thought berries were okay to eat. Thanks for the opportunity. So berries, again, like any food, have carbs. In fact, some are very sweet, some are not as sweet. And it's going to depend on your metabolism, how much you can have. One way we work around letting people have fruit or getting it at first is having fruit juice that's sweetened with something other than sugar. Or there are now products like different types of yogurts that have little pieces of fruit in the serving, so you don't have access to all of it. So, Tom, it's going to depend on your metabolism as to how many berries you can have. Someone came to me, want to make it work the first time, I'd say no berries. Mandy says, most of my clients can get away with deducting fiber. I tell them sugar alcohols should not be deducted because they still produce an insulin response. This also helps them keep sweetener intake down. How do you address the net carbs? So as I mentioned, I would use total carbs at first, getting people into a state of progress where they're headed. And then some people can use net carbs from the get-go, others can't. The the confusion partly comes from the different metabolisms that people have, different levels of carbohydrate tolerance. If you're very carbohydrate tolerant, then you might be able to have more carbs. A rough rule of thumb is that they're double the net carbs, or the other way around. They're double the total carbs when you're doing the net carbs. So if you have 20 net carbs, it really means 40 total. And of course, I prefer people to get their nutrition from real foods without a whole lot of additives. The sugar alcohols and other artificial sweeteners and an insulin response, I've yet to see solid data on this, although I hear it out there. There may be individuals that have tested themselves. This is one of those things that cries out for more research to see the effect of these on insulin, because I just don't see that in the literature. Jake, I've heard we can deduct some carbs on fermented products. Yes, yogurt, kombucha, cottage cheese, sauerkraut. Again, I don't deduct carbs. Use total carbs. Don't use net carbs. If you want it to work the first time, the carbs in vitamin water, erythritol, do I count those? Again, you can or you can't. If it was the strictest version coming to me, I would say use total carbs, don't deduct anything. And as an aside, I will see that change from net carbs to total carbs actually make things start working again. So if you're having a success and then it's stopping, but you're using net carbs, just go to total carbs and you may actually start having the progress that you're looking for. That small change can make a big effect. Can you give us a quick example of how you read a food label? Mary asks. Sure. The simple method that I teach people to do is just look at the total carbs, the number that comes after total carbohydrate. G means grams. So if it says 5G, it means 5 grams, 5 total grams of carbs. Don't deduct the fiber, the sugar. I mean, on some labels, it doesn't even add up right. So that causes endless confusion. So if you see something that says 0 grams of carbohydrate, it might just be fine, and hey, you can have as much as you want. Heather asks, are there carbs in supplements and medications? Do we count the carbs in psyllium husks or Metamucil? If we take that, yes, I would count the carbs as the most conservative, meaning I want this to work the first time. I'm not going to assume whether you absorb or don't absorb. I assume you absorb so that it'll work the first time. And when your hunger's gone after a day or two into eating this way, it's really no big deal. But you can test it out in your metabolism to see if it works for you. This is Dr. Eric Westman for Ask Adapt to Your Life. Please give us questions, suggestions down at the bottom. Subscribe so that you don't miss another edition in the future.